The Secret Story of Him. Chapter 20. Beneath the whipping post, we smelled Master Samuel's plantation before we saw it, the stench of sweat, rot, and suffering thick in the air, rising off the land like a ghost that refused to leave. The grand house stood against the blood-red sky, its white columns towering like the ribs of a carcass left to bleach in the sun. This was where I was conceived in violence. This was where my mama Kalisa was dragged into the night, her screams swallowed by the magnolia trees. And Kizzy, she had watched. She was Master Samuel's wife, born into wealth, raised on soft hands and silken dresses. And yet, she had knelt at the altar of brutality beside him. She had smiled as she sold children like cattle. She had sipped sweet tea on the porch while the men in chains were forced to mount the women like beasts. This plantation wasn't just her husband's empire. It was hers, and tonight it would become her grave. The 9 Arkemen that chose to stay with me moved like shadows through the fields, blades whispering death among the cotton. But I walked tall down the main road, letting the firelight catch the hard angles of my face. Let them see me. Let them know the reckoning had come. From the windows of the big house, candlelight flickered against shifting figures, house slaves whispering warnings, overseers scrambling for their guns. Too late. Their end had been simmering for days. We poisoned their water first, lacing their wells with sickness. By now, half the plantation was already doubled over, guts twisting, vomit spilling between their fingers. The other half would follow soon enough. But Kizzy, she needed to see me before she died. Master Samuel stood on the porch, shotgun shaking in his grip. His breath hitched as my eyes locked onto mine. The same eyes that had watched my mother suffer. The same eyes that had calculated her worth in dollars and cents. You're no better than me, boy. He spat, voice raw with desperation. Look at this. Look at what you've done. All this death, you're just like your father. Behind him, Kizzy stood frozen, clutching her Bible. Her lips trembled, her skin pale as the silk of her nightgown. She had recognized me the moment I stepped onto the path. The ghost she never thought would return had walked right up to her door. I smiled then, his smile, cold, cruel, the same smile he had worn as he held the whip, as he broke bodies like brittle twigs. You're right about one thing, Father, I said, voice carrying across the dying fields. He yelled, Don't call me that. I smiled. I learned cruelty at your knee. Now let me show you everything else I learned. And then we unleashed hell. The Arkemen fell upon the overseers like wolves in the dark. Men who had spent their lives whipping flesh apart now found themselves torn open. No quick deaths, no mercy. A bullet was too kind. They deserved to feel it, the same slow agony they had inflicted on others. One tried to run, tripping over his own feet, while running down his chin as the sickness took him. A blade kissed the back of his neck, severing spine from skull. Another fumbled for his rifle, hands slick with sweat. A hatchet split his chest, ribs cracking like dry branches. Then we turned to the barns, the breeding pits. The women were there, some chained to the walls, others curled around their bellies, swollen with children they never wanted, sired by men who had been forced upon them. Some clutched their infants close, shielding them from a world that had already decided their fate. Others had eyes so hollow, so emptied by years of suffering, that I wondered if they even knew they were still alive. We freed them first. Even the enslaved men were held accountable, those who grew drunk on stolen power, who found thrill in enforcing the master's will, who forced themselves on our women and called it survival. We did not see them as brothers. They were no different than the overseers, and when judgment came, they died screaming beside the very men they once served. You see, our women are the holiest force to ever touch this cursed earth. They are the sun's energy in the flesh, the wounds of all creation. They are not just sacred, they are the walking altars, living, breathing temples of God's first daughters. The living vessels of Ogun's fire and ocean's sweetness, the wine songs of Maul, and the wrath of Orion's storm. Where a black woman walks, Soil remembers its purpose. Her laughter stirs the rivers, her pain bends the trees. When she bleeds, the moon turns her face in shame. When she is violated, the orishas wail. She is the original portal. She is the memory of stars. Wherever black women are, that is home, that is kingdom, that is peace. So we let them decide. We handed over the men who had guarded their cages, the traitors who once kept the keys. Some were forgiven, most were not. Some had their throats slit beneath moonlight. Others were torn apart by the very hands they once tried to break. Some simply watched, drinking in the sound of screams as justice was delivered. We did not interfere. It was not vengeance. It was restoration. The sky cracked open, and the ancestors sang. The blood wasn't spilled. It was offered. By the time we reached the big house, the plantation was a graveyard. Kizzy tried to run. I let her. She bolted down the back steps, barefoot and wild, her silk nightgown torn, hair tangled like old vines. She ran like the devil had come for her. He did. The flames from the burning quarters lit her path like hell's own lanterns. She passed the men who once called her mistress, faces bloated, necks twisted, blood drying in the grass. She ran past the barn she'd watched burn, past the women she used to dress up like dolls before selling them off with a penstroke and a cold smile. She made it to the whipping post, the same one she'd watched so many of us bleed on. She collapsed, gasping, clawing at the earth, her Bible still clutched in white-knuckled fingers. "Please," he sobbed. Please, I." Her Bible was still in her hand, filthy, creased, the leather cracked from years of use, not to comfort the suffering, but to justify it. "Please," she gasped, her voice shrill and trembling. Please, I." "Don't you dare say my name." I stepped closer. She flinched like a kicked dog. "You sat on that porch while they raped my mother. You fanned yourself while they carved babies out of women's bellies. You listened to the screams like they were background music to your dinner parties." She shook her head, tears streaming, mouth working like she might still summon some mercy from me. "You sent little boys and girls into the hands of men who smelled like sweat and rot, and you knew their dark intentions aground. You turned freedom into a curse for the ones who begged for it. And now you pray. You did not pray for them. You didn't pray for me. I was just," she stammered, her lips quivering. "You were his wife." I crouched down beside her, close enough for her to feel the heat of my breath. She tried to crawl backward, but the whipping post stood firm behind her, as if it demanded to witness the end. "You were never just a wife. You were an architect, a smiling executioner. You helped build this. You chose to be cruel. You bathed in it. You lit candles and called it God while you sold girls into hell. Mama Kalisa begged you. She was pregnant. She fell to her knees, and you laughed." Her face collapsed into sobs. She shook her head, but there was no running left in her. Only dirt, only ghosts. "You killed her just like he did. You just didn't get your hands dirty. You didn't just watch. You participated. You helped. You held us down while he made us do things to you, to him, to each other, all for your twisted thrill. You called it playtime. We called it hell, and you loved every fucking second of it." And then, quietly, almost tender, "But I will." The blade was already in my hand. I pressed it to her throat. She gasped. Her eyes went wide, not from pain, from the truth. There was no heaven coming for her, no soft white light, only me. I carved her open like history had carved us. The blood poured fast, hot, steaming in the night air. It soaked the roots of the post, the earth drinking deeply, and as she fell, gurgling, twitching, eyes locked on the stars that had watched us suffer for centuries, I said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. The land had finally taken its due, and for the first time since its planting, the plantation knew fear. Master Samuel was the last, bound to the porch rail. His breath came in ragged, choked gasps. His once proud frame slumped in the chair where he had once sat sipping whiskey and watching men be broken like mules. The shotgun had been pried from his hands. His fine silk waistcoat was soaked through with sweat, and blood. His lip trembled as he watched the flames consume the barns, the fields, the pens where he'd bred human flesh like livestock. His empire crumbled before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do but choke on the ashes. I stood before him, letting him see me in the firelight, letting the weight of the night settle into his bones, his son, his shame, his reckoning. You think, he wheezed, his voice a ghost of its former power, you've won. A sick, hollow laugh rattled from his throat. You think burnin' my house makes you a free man. He coughed, spitting blood onto the porch. The South will hunt you, you and all your little nigger followers. They'll hunt your bastards too. They'll hang every nigger who ever spoke your name. I crouched before him, tilting my head. You still don't get it, do you? His breath hitched. This isn't revenge, I said, voice low, measured, letting each word carve into him like a blade. This is rot, spreading through the roots of every plantation like yours. You built your world on the backs of people who never forgot, people who learned patience, who learned pain, who learned how to sharpen hate into something more dangerous than your whips ever could. I leaned in close, so close he could see the fire dancing in my eyes. You're not just dying, Samuel, you're being erased. His body jerked against the ropes, his fingers twitching. He wanted to fight. He wanted to spit and curse and rail against the tide. But the master who had once commanded the world with a snap of his fingers was just another old man now pissing himself in the face of death. I straightened, taking my time as I unfastened my blade from my belt. You are the last breath of a dying world, I said, pressing the cold steel against his throat. His pupils shrank, his lips parted, a final plea forming. I opened his neck before he could speak. Blood gushed hot and thick, pulsing over his chest in wet rivers. He gurgled, choked, his body jerking against the chair, but I did not look away. I did not blink. I wanted him to see me, to know the name of the ghost that dragged him to hell. When his body stilled, I wiped my blade clean on his waistcoat and turned to the others. The Arkemen stood among the wreckage, their faces streaked with blood and soot, their hands shaking with the weight of what they had done. The women we had freed stood in clusters, their eyes wide with the firelight, their bodies still tense with the memory of shackles. The plantation was dead, but the people, they were still breathing. I stepped onto the railing, looking out at them, at the ruin we had made, at the freedom we had carved from the bones of our captors. And I spoke, my voice clear, steady, cutting through the night like a blade. We do not bow, we do not kneel, we do not run. My gaze swept across them, catching every pair of eyes. We are not survivors. We are not victims. We are the fire. We are the reckoning. We are the end of men like Samuel Jones. A hush fell over them, a silence so deep it swallowed the crackling of flames, the distant cries of dying men. And then a woman stepped forward. Her dress was torn, her lips split, but her spine was straight. She raised her chin, lifted a trembling hand, and let out a cry, a raw, keening wail, so full of grief and rage it sent a shiver down my spine. And then another woman joined in, then another, and another, until the night itself was alive with the sound of 100 voices screaming for every mother lost, for every child stolen, for every life crushed beneath the weight of this cursed land. And in the middle of it all, I stood still, watching the past burn. Suddenly, an older light-skinned woman stepped out from the shadows. Her voice cracked like a whisper through time. "Hin, is that you?" I froze. Her face was aged and weathered, carved by years of silence and sorrow. At first, I didn't know her. Then, "It's me, Joan." The moment her name passed through her lips, my knees nearly buckled. 1,000 memories broke loose inside me all at once, memories I'd buried just to keep breathing. Joan, she was the one who slipped cornbread and scraps of salted meat into my hands when Master Samuel and Kizzy locked me in the shed and left me to starve for weeks. She risked the whip, the noose, the silence of being made an example, just to keep a child alive. And now here she was, real, warm, trembling, as we collapsed into each other's arms. I could feel her ribs through her dress, her tears soaked into my shirt, and mine into hers. We didn't speak. There were no words that could survive what we had both seen. And then it came like a flood. I remembered them, all of them, the women who had stood shoulder to shoulder with my mother, Mama Kalisa, in the mouth of the beast. Flag, who lost her tongue for speaking a prayer in her own language. Maypole, who rocked the dead in her arms so the living could sleep. Zhang and Nini, who braided strength into our hair and stories into our hearts. Denise, Renee, Ernestine, Pamela, Joyce, Glenda, Monique, Sheila, and Gerald, each of them a pillar in a crumbling world. They weren't just women. They were the secret spine of our survival. The soft hands that covered children's ears when the screens came at night. The backs that bore bruises meant for others. The eyes that watched and sold, husbands beaten, babies buried, and still rose before dawn to cook, to clean, to sing. They were Mama Kalisa's sisters, not by blood, but by fire. They bled together, wailed together, stood together when the men were broken, when the gods went silent, when freedom was just a rumor whispered through the cane. And even when their own hearts were shattered, they found ways to teach us how to love, how to hold each other, how to remember. Even when memory felt like poison, they gave everything they had until all they had left was each other. They built something sacred in the shadows, and now with Joan in my arms, I felt all of them there. Every whispered in, every stolen glance of defiance, every moment they had chosen to survive, so I might someday become him. I thought I had nothing left. I thought the world had stripped me bare, took my name, my God, my mother, even my breath. But I was wrong. I had them, and they had me. I thought the fire burning inside me came from hate. Hate for the system, for the lies, for the men who wore power like skin. But I was wrong. What burned in me was deeper. It was love. Not soft, not gentle. It was a love sharpened by suffering. A love that knew the sound of chains and the silence after screams. A love that remembered the names no one else spoke. It was not the kind of love they write in books. It was the kind that waits in the blood. The kind that dreams of freedom with its fists clenched. The kind that forgives nothing but still hopes everything can be healed. And that is what made me dangerous. They say even the soil went bad after that night, that nothing ever grew there again. Good. Let it be a monument. Let it be a warning. Let it be the grave of an old world that thought it could plant suffering and never reap the storm. I am him, the Son of God who speaks in storms, not psalms. The prayer says, on earth as it is in heaven. What they didn't mention was, those blessings came only if your skin was white. There were no guarantees for us, so I made them honor their words, from their Bibles wrapped in leather made out of human skin, and their constitution that declares all men are created equal. I am my mother's vengeance, and my father's nightmare. I am the beginning and the end, the poison and the flame, the justice they never thought would find them. And somewhere in Cameron, my children grow strong and free, never knowing the weight of chains, never learning to bow. They will hear the stories of the Arkemen, of the plantations that burned, of the night their father brought hell to his father's house. But they will never know the pain that forged us into weapons. Let history remember this. We did not ask for war. We did not strike the first blow. But by all that is holy and unholy, we will strike the last.
Wow. This ain't just a book, it's the truth. This needs to be a movie, y'all. For real. Ooh, I'm so glad he got they asses. I've been waiting for that. This story gave me chills, y'all. If you have been listening like I have, then do your part. You need to hit that like and subscribe button and then share it with somebody, please. We gotta push to get this made into a movie. Hopefully the ancestors can help with that. Ooh, I love you, him. You've been listening to The Secret Story of Him, From Enslaved to the Grave, the man who freed more slaves than Harriet Tubman. Next, Chapter 21. Vibrations of the Jasma. Coming soon.